Thanks very much. When Eka approached us and said, would we as consultants who have been at these seminars, a few times, would we like to participate by giving some sort of contribution? Of course, our answer was yes. What we've tried to do is to each come up with a slide. So here we have Cornelia from ReachCentrum, we have Ying, who you know from REACHLaw, and we have Martina from ENVIRON, and my name's Linda Jean from RPA. We've each come up with one slide. The idea is that we will try to give you a little bit of an idea of what we think we've learned as consultants who've helped a number of companies to have helped and are helping a number of companies to put together their applications for authorization. I have to say thank you very much to Hugo, because I think that what I'm saying is more or less identical to what he said, only I will take it in one slide, hopefully 2 minutes. We start with Martina. Is the button?
No. Okay. Yeah, it's a little difficult to have just have an important topic talking about in 2 minutes here, but that's what we agreed to. So everybody has 2 minutes. It's kind of a speak or something like that. For me, like going or helping several companies in authorization process, either in consortia or importer or downstream user, what I recognize is what is very, very important, that the companies take the time before they start to embark on this process, to have this kind of a scoping meeting. So, and the reason is because we saw that decisions are often made within companies from one of these three groups here. So I can't. So this groups here, does it work? No. Yeah, I tried, but I don't know. Yeah, decision is often made maybe here on the people are kind of in the sales department, or maybe it's a managing director if it's a small company, or decisions are made, to hear on the, somebody who's the head of the REACH department, it's less made here by the process engineers and R&D experts. And sometimes the decisions are made to go forward to an authorization for a couple of substances without consulting in-house with these different departments. But even these different departments sit in different locations depending on the size of the company. They never see each other, and for really sound and knowledge-based decision, whether you go for an authorization or not, or for which of the substances, I think it is very important that the company takes the time to have all these groups together. And we recognize when we have these kind of meetings that they often met each other the first time. They never saw each other before. And so we kind of, what you can avoid is, so we had meetings with companies who wanted to apply for a couple of chromates. The salesperson asked within the company for which articles use the chromates, which chromates you're using, and then they get a list, and then they said, okay, this is what we're going for authorization. But if you have these kind of meetings and discuss it with the R&D engineers, etc., then you realize they maybe have been working for taking one chromate for surface treatment for a specific article, because it was just done in the history for years and years and years, and they never thought about it, whether it's still necessary or whether they can switch to another chromate, so not applying maybe for 3 chromates, maybe just applying for 1. So you can save really a lot of time if you take the time before you embark on the process. Same thing, we had another case where the R&D department was discussing with the REACH department, saying, okay, yes, we can substitute until the sunset date, no problem, technically we change the solvent and everything would work, we can kind of do the tests in that time, but they didn't talk to the product and the sales people who said, yeah, but listen, we are, as for example, pharmaceutical companies, we need a lot of regulatory approvals, and there are countries which take years and years and years, not maybe the European or the US authorities, but maybe authorities we know in Korea or in Japan or in some other countries. So that, okay, you might be technically available to substitute until the sunset date, but we're not getting the regulatory approval until then. So it's very important to have all these people together, and I just want to emphasize, take the time before you embark on this authorization process. Thanks.
Thanks. One quick comment. I'm just go ahead a sec. Anybody who can translate the following word into English, could you help me out? I used to work as a consultant in Finland, and there's a word that we as consultants used almost always when we came to talk to companies, and the word in Finnish is työmaasokeus. Who can translate it in English? It means you're blind. Yeah, blind. You're blind in the workplace where you are. I mean, the idea is that you don't see forest from the trees. That's the same idea. But the consultant, when it comes to a workplace, and he just in 10 seconds realizes that what nobody has actually seen in the workplace, because they've been working there for 10 years and they've set their ways of working. So I think what you were describing here, Martina, was exactly what's going on. It's so obvious that these people should talk together, but they never have. And the consultant comes in, let's have a meeting. Ooh. Okay, Ying, your turn.
So what I want to share with you is about how supply chain can get organized for authorization. As you can see, there are thematic kind of depiction of a supply chain from the chemical supplier to all the way down to the end product, and you can apply as a standalone downstream user at any level where you use the substance, and you can also apply as a group using the substance. We also ventured with end user sector driven kind of the end user sector driven joint application, and also of course it's been said a lot that the supplier can apply to cover the whole supply chain. So I think people from yesterday to today, I think people has been quite polite, but if you read Chemical Watch, you would say you would get the idea that the early experiences with supplier-driven applications and joint applications has not been receiving very positive results, and I think it's. Well, there are exceptions, but certainly I think that's the overall impression. I think a number of people in the February conference and also this workshop that they have emphasized the good part of the downstream user-driven application. So don't get me wrong. I started by doing authorization by making two downstream user applications. So I certainly agree. I'm in agreement with them. It's easier. It's an ideal case for consultants. However, I find it a little bit disturbing because in the February conference we also heard that in average the cost for application is in average in February was around 200,000 euros, which you ask this question whether this is sustainable for SMEs or even companies that use this substance with very low quantities, not in a core business. So like in my work, I have encountered quite a few SMEs. As if I could quote my boss, he says that sometimes we feel so sorry for those guys. For a minute, we want to do it for free for them. But only for a minute. It's not going to be sustainable for us, but we cannot do it for free for everyone. But we can do what I think we can do is that we try to, can we learn from the past and try to make successful applications while maintaining a reasonable cost even for the SMEs or anyone who finds 200,000 euros a price tag too high or unreasonable. So that's what we have been doing. I think a number of people, Martina, I totally agree with Martina about the scoping study, very crucial in doing it. I agree with Hugo that the use definition is very important. We even go a little bit further that try to select the right companies in the joint application, and we have tried to see whether we can motivate the supply chain to supply information. We have ventured into develop also methodologies in SEA so that we don't have to make 100 company-specific analysis and add them together, which won't cost any. It won't save any cost. So that's what we have been doing for the last 2 years, and this work will go to the committees in the second half of this year. I hope that we have found a balance, but it could very well be that next year I come back and I will come back and say to a number of people in this room that you were right, I was wrong, it cannot be done. But even that's the case, I hope that colleagues in industry and in consultancies will continue to look for a way, which I think in a way you can say that to find the balance of the request for facts and details with the cost of information, to find that balance, because in a way, I quite often think on a ideological level that I think the legal text has provided cost-saving mechanism, and it should be implementable, and we should keep trying, and because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Thank you. One observation there is that the costs, we are monitoring the costs. We actually ask of every applicant to give that information to us in confidence. Of course, we will not disclose the information per applicant. But we've also noticed that the application cost, at least so far, has been going down. We estimated about 30% from the beginning. And there is this, I think the Americans would say braces in the belt, no, Brits would say braces in the belt, and the Americans would say suspenders in the belt. So you put like a belt and then you put suspenders just in case. So there was being kind of overloading of information coming in the applications in the beginning, and still probably is, because nobody really knows what is fit for purpose. I mean, the committees are struggling a bit with that. We are struggling in the Secretariat, and of course the applicants are. So what is the right amount of information to put in? So if you don't know, you put a bit too much, but you don't know where to cut it from, in a sense, and that's why the application cost probably was higher than necessary in the beginning. So that learning, in a sense, is happening at the same time. We hope that the application cost will be lower in the future as well. But the word is now yours, Lindsay.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's really struck me about this particular seminar yesterday afternoon and today is how, to a very much more noticeable and increasing extent, everyone who's speaking is more or less saying the same thing in different words, which is not the way we started out. We started out with the industry associations having one particular point of view, with companies having a different perspective, with ECHA having a different perspective, and as time has gone by and we have actually got real experience on which to base what we're doing and what we're saying, you see that all of our recommendations and our positions and experience are coming closer together. So I think that's quite interesting, which is, of course, back to the point which I raised, which is that Hugo talked about whether you should apply individually or whether you should go for a joint application. In fact, what I've got here is just a couple of pointers for you right at the very beginning of that process. It's not whether you go for a joint application, but whether you decide that preparing your dossier as part of a group or individually is a better choice for you and your particular situation. I think that what a number of consortia are doing at the moment is they are preparing together as a group, but still submitting individually, because of course each company has a different technical and economic feasibility when it comes to the alternatives, even if the alternatives are the same. And obviously each company has a different perhaps a different number of workers, so you're going to get a different cost of risks calculation, and your benefits will be different because your cost of doing something else will differ per company. So this is the particular, and this is just a few hints and tips for those of you who are here today who might be facing this particular choice. And there is one person here today who I just met at the coffee break who has in fact made this choice. They started off in an authorization consortium, but it very soon became evident that this was not going to work for them, so they left the consortium and they are now doing the application for authorization on their own as an individual company. So basically, do you have the same use as the other potential, let's say as the authorization consortium? Do you have the same use, everybody in the consortium? Do you have the same process? Very important. What is the level of in-house expertise of the people in the consortium? If one company knows a lot more and has a lot more resources available than another, what implications does that have for you if you are that company? And essentially, do you have the same kind of robust and available monitoring data, which is becoming more and more important? So you need to have a look at the commonalities. Are you all in the same sector, for example? It's not just do you all have the same use, but do you all work in the same sector? And of course, you can, in this respect, work either with your competition in a consortium, or you can choose to work vertically as, for example, a manufacturer with your particular downstream user supply chain. So that would also be an option if you're in the same sector. Do you all produce the same product? In many cases, the use may be the same, but the product may be different. What are the implications of that? And what about the commonalities of the supply chain? This becomes quite relevant because if, for example, you are producing a plasticizer, let's take a well-known example, you can be sure that the people who are using your plasticizer are not only obtaining it from you, they're obtaining it from multiple suppliers. So you need to take those kind of things into account. The advantages of preparing in a group, if there are sufficient commonalities to do so, are fairly obvious. And I think we've covered them, so I'll just mention them very, very briefly. At least in part, you can share your CSR. You can share part of your analysis of alternatives if the alternatives are the same, and of course part of your socioeconomic analysis. Not necessarily all of them, depending on the structure of your application. You can, in your cost sharing, find that you actually save costs, but we'll talk about that, and it has been discussed in some detail already. In-house resource time is an interesting one. If you don't have a lot of resource available, you may feel that you can save time and effort by doing it in a group because you really are essentially sharing the amount of time that's involved amongst all the companies in the group. Obviously, if you do it as a group, you are going to be more in line with corporate expectations. I think we've said this very, very often. You have to realize, though, that corporate expectations that everything in REACH gets done in a consortium like you did for registration is not necessarily the best way to do it for authorization. And remember that a registration authorization does not necessarily work, and very often does not work at all when it comes to authorization. But that's what many companies are expecting. So disadvantages, certainly Hugo mentioned this, in contracts, I can't tell you enough how much time it takes to get the contracts of working in a group sorted out. Particularly, do we have anyone from Poland here? But my experience in working with Polish companies is that it can take a year just to get the contract sorted out. So this is really, really very time consuming. You may have a reduced voice in decision making, which may not appeal to you. You obviously, if you're doing your own application for authorization, you decide together with your consultants on certain key issues. If you're in a group, it's a group discussion. It's time intensive, and I think this is really comes back to the point about the in-house resource time. You don't necessarily save time if you go in a group. You do need as much time in total, but you spend it on different things, less on the application for your company, more on the group issues, the discussions, the decision-making process, the agreements, etc., and contracts, obviously. Reference data, which we know comes from the RAC. One of the disadvantages at the moment is that it comes late, right? So that if you have a need to get a lot of things authorized, approved and agreed and aligned after it's arrived, you might find that you're in a severe time constraint right at the end. And the other thing, and I think this is really important to remember, somebody was saying the other day that, I think it was at the CEFIC REACH workshop a couple of weeks ago, that in fact a CEF is just a regulatory form of a cartel. And when it comes to authorization, if you're going to be working together in a group, you have even more serious and potential cartel issues, irrespective of whether you're working with a group of your downstream users or whether you're working with your competitors. So don't underestimate the amount of time it takes to manage that aspect of not contravening any competition law. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to give you as hints and tips on making that decision. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Linda Jean. And I remember of the cartel part, it was there was actually a case where I don't say which country and which companies, but there was actually a cartel that was a price cartel that was actually uncovered, which then meant that these guys, when they were there meeting at a technical level later, they had like 10, 20 companies working together, whatever. They always had to have a lawyer there, which cost like €1,000 an hour. And the only thing the guy was doing was playing solitaire on the computer, but they had to be there because they couldn't get away with that. So it was no cartel. That's important. It's not only that you have been caught red-handed, of course it's bad, but even if there's a suspicion of that, so that is something that has to be taken very, very much into care, and I think that you made that point very clearly. So thanks for that. Okay, next one, Cornelia.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So I heard Martina say 2 minutes. I hope I do it in 2 minutes. Let's see. I mean, you have heard, I think, basically everything you need to hear. So, I mean, I just want to highlight here a problem that is maybe inherent to the process. And for this, please allow that I become a little bit philosophical. So here you have just one picture. And what do you see? You see two things. You see a two-dimensional image of a dossier and a two-dimensional image of a plant. But is this real or is this true? Well, for the dossier, we could do as we have seen in the ECHA presentations. I could provide you with a link. You can click on it. You can download it. You can read it. You can evaluate it. But can you click on the plant and see it? Is it becoming real? It will always stay an image. And also what is missing, of course, and we have heard this, are the humans. Yeah, I mean, they're the workers in the factory, the whatever, people in the plant, the ones having prepared the application, the ones evaluating the applications are simply not there. And as we have heard, as Martina has said and Jan has said, and also Matti has confirmed, it's also the very first thing I'm doing after we have signed the contract, of course. So I take the plane or a train and I visit your site and let me explain what you are doing, and I ask you sometimes uncomfortable questions just to understand what's going on. So behind this background is, as Tim has also outlined yesterday, of uttermost importance for you as the applicant to describe your process, your use, your risk management measures, whatever you do in your plant, to someone that has never seen that and will potentially also never see it, so that he or she or whoever in the committees understands. And then on the other side, maybe also for the committees, it's maybe of uttermost importance not just to read the dossier and ask questions or even grant you a trialogue in the best case, even if they don't like that too much. I mean, maybe they should also consider to visit your plant. Or if they can't do it, if they have no time, or if it's too costly, maybe they can send a RAC or SEA colleague from the country or from the competent authorities just to support them in evaluating the dossier. Because I really think if we want this to work, if a just judgment cannot be just made based on two-dimensional and somehow unreal information.